Justin Gaethje would put $500 in cash on the line, in his own training camp, to any sparring partner who could drop him with a body shot. UFC veteran Drew Dober just revealed that detail publicly, and it explains something that has been confusing the entire MMA world since Sunday night. How does a 37-year-old fighter absorb the kind of devastating body shots Ilia Topuria landed in round 2? Shots that put him on the canvas, shots that should have ended the fight right there, and somehow still have enough left to come back and finish the job 2 rounds later? The answer, according to the man who actually tried to collect that bounty himself, is that Gaethje has spent years deliberately training his body to survive exactly the punishment Topuria gave him. Start there because it reframes the entire fight in a way that the live broadcast did not fully communicate. Dober confirmed directly that he personally tried to earn that $500 in sparring. He said he knows firsthand that Gaethje can recover from devastating bodywork because he has tested it himself, repeatedly, in the gym. That is not a passive toughness. That is an actively cultivated, specifically engineered durability, the kind of preparation that sounds completely insane until you watch a man take Topuria's best body shots, go down, and somehow still be standing and throwing combinations 2 rounds later. Gaethje did not get lucky on Sunday. He spent years paying other professional fighters to hit him as hard as possible in exactly the area Topuria eventually targeted. The Rocky comparison that has been circulating since the fight is not just a lazy cliché. When you actually lay out the structural parallels, it is genuinely uncanny. Topuria, the undefeated champion from a former Soviet republic, dominant and seemingly untouchable, cast almost perfectly into the Ivan Drago role. Gaethje, written off after losses to Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway, told repeatedly that his best years were behind him, that he would never reach the top of the division, rising back up through years of criticism and disappointment to deliver the performance of his career on the biggest stage the sport has ever built. This is the kind of narrative arc that Hollywood writers spend years trying to construct artificially. The UFC just produced it in real time, on the White House lawn, in front of a global audience. Justin Gaethje sat down with Pat McAfee afterward and explained exactly how he broke Topuria down, and his analysis was more clinical and more devastating than most post-fight breakdowns typically are. He said he was resetting his own feet every 1 to 2 seconds throughout the fight. Constant micro-adjustments, treating the exchange like a computer processing code in real time rather than reacting emotionally to the chaos. And then he identified what he believes was Topuria's actual fatal flaw, and it had nothing to do with technique. He said Topuria's expectations were his undoing. Gaethje explained his own approach directly. He goes into every fight with 0 expectations specifically so he can never be surprised by anything that happens inside the cage. Topuria, by contrast, walked in with a specific outcome already decided in his head. And when that outcome did not materialize in the first 2 minutes the way he had promised it would, Gaethje said Topuria was completely caught off guard by a reality he had not prepared himself to face. Gaethje had warned him beforehand, when we get to round 2, when we get to round 3, you are going to be in hell. That is exactly where Topuria ended up. Kamaru Usman's breakdown of the fight deserves serious attention because he gave Topuria more credit than almost anyone else discussing the loss, and his framing is worth sitting with. Usman argued that Topuria did not fight badly. He did not fight with excessive pride. He fought exactly the way Topuria has always fought, backing opponents up, forcing them onto their heels, draining their gas tank just to survive the pressure. Usman specifically praised the ground game display in round 2, the guard passing, the armbar attempt, the systematic threat that should have finished most opponents in the sport. Topuria did everything correctly, according to Usman. He simply ran into a specific kind of opponent that very few fighters in history have ever solved. Usman called it controlled chaos, Gaethje's specific and rare ability to absorb sustained punishment while staying tactically organized enough underneath the chaos to eventually find the finish. That combination, Usman argued, is what makes Gaethje genuinely unique rather than simply tough. Belal Muhammad's reaction went even further, declaring that Gaethje has now stamped himself as the most violent and most exciting fighter in UFC history. Not hyperbole delivered lightly, but a direct response to a trophy case that genuinely has no remaining gaps. Gaethje entered the UFC as an undefeated champion from another organization. He has earned a bonus in literally every UFC fight he has ever had. He became the first 2-time interim champion in the division's history. He holds the BMF title. He now holds the undisputed belt. Muhammad's question afterward was genuinely difficult to answer. What is actually left for this man to accomplish inside the cage? The only fight with bigger commercial stakes remaining is the one against Conor McGregor, contingent entirely on McGregor getting past Holloway first. The retirement question that emerged in the days following the fight deserves serious examination because the argument for walking away right now is more compelling than it might initially sound. The case being made is straightforward. Gaethje made McGregor look prophetic by following through on his own promise to retire if he did not get a title shot, and the UFC, in an almost unprecedented move, simply gave it to him. He then went out and delivered a performance that multiple analysts are calling impossible to top, in front of the largest audience combat sports has produced in years, finishing the most dominant champion in the lightweight division's recent history. The earnings from the night alone, according to estimates discussed by analysts, likely landed somewhere between $5 and $10 million when bonuses, sponsorships, and the title fight purse are combined. The argument is simple. He has golf, he has his dog, he has financial security, and there is no possible follow-up performance that could top what just happened on that lawn. Whether Gaethje himself shares that read on his own career remains to be seen, but the logic behind the suggestion is difficult to dismiss outright. Topuria's actual physical condition continues to come into sharper focus, and the picture is more severe than initial reports suggested. His close friend Pablo Motos visited him directly and confirmed a broken nose along with fractures to both eye sockets. Topuria can currently barely open his eyes. And in the middle of that recovery, according to Motos, Topuria delivered a line that tells you everything about his mentality going forward. Champions don't fall quietly. When we fall loudly. He is already discussing a rematch with Gaethje, specifically requesting it take place in Spain. The public reaction to Topuria since the loss has included a significant wave of hostility, and that deserves honest context. A lot of people simply do not like him, and that dynamic is understandable given how loud and confrontational his promotional style has always been. False rumors even circulated that his sponsor had terminated their partnership following the loss, completely untrue. In reality, Topuria gained over 1 million Instagram followers in the aftermath of the fight, which says something important about how losses, even devastating ones, do not necessarily damage a fighter's commercial profile the way conventional wisdom suggests they should. The assessment from a former opponent carries particular weight here, because watching someone who has actually been inside the cage with Topuria explain what went wrong reveals something the outside analysts cannot fully access. The argument made was that pride comes before the fall, that Topuria became too cocky, overlooked his opponent, and got humbled as a direct consequence. The specific examples cited were extraordinary. Topuria reportedly suggesting at various points that he could beat Terence Crawford, that he might be able to box Canelo Alvarez at some point. That level of self-belief extending across combat sports entirely, regardless of weight class or discipline, paints a picture of a fighter whose confidence had genuinely stopped recognizing limits. The concern raised afterward was a real one, that some fighters who suffer their first loss after long unbeaten streaks never fully recover their previous form, citing Prince Nassim Hamed as a historical example of a dominant champion who was simply never the same after his first defeat. Whether Topuria follows that pattern or whether he returns as an improved version of himself is something that genuinely cannot be known until it happens. Alexander Volkanovski's prediction for a potential rematch offers a useful counterbalance to the pessimism. He believes Topuria wins if he makes a specific adjustment, fighting at better distance rather than rushing the way he did against Gaethje, returning to the patient trap-setting approach that made him so effective against Volkanovski himself. The diagnosis is consistent across multiple analysts now. The aggression, not a fundamental skill gap, is what cost Topuria this fight. Alex Pereira's situation continues to develop following his loss to Cyril Gane. He confirmed directly to Ariel Helwani that he will not appeal the result, despite remaining frustrated with referee Herb Dean and continuing to call for greater accountability for officials before, in his words, someone gets seriously hurt in this sport. His team has formally requested a rematch from the UFC, and the organization has indicated they will revisit the conversation once the dust settles from the magnitude of producing the White House card. Pereira's specific claim is that Gane was able to land those finishing shots only because exhaustion had compromised his ability to defend, a characterization that sets up his expectation for September. The Josh Hoyt situation adds another layer of complexity to an already scrambled heavyweight picture. Hoyt, sitting at only 4-0 in the UFC, responded directly when Pereira suggested he would not mind sharing the Octagon with him, confirming he would never turn down an opportunity that significant. Under normal circumstances, a fighter with that limited a UFC resume would not be anywhere near a former champion of Pereira's stature. But the heavyweight division has been thrown into genuine chaos by the events of the White House card, and insiders are now suggesting this specific matchup could realistically happen sooner than anyone would have predicted a month ago. Michael Chandler addressed his knockout loss to Mauricio Ruffy directly and without excuses, crediting Ruffy's length, speed, and accuracy for the finish while expressing genuine gratitude for the opportunity to compete on the card at all. His framing emphasized preparation and character over result, that he left no stone unturned in his camp, that losses are simply part of competing at this level, and that how a fighter responds to adversity defines them more than any single outcome. Whatever the future holds for his career at this stage, the way he processed this specific loss publicly reflected the same composed professionalism that has defined his media presence throughout his UFC run. Here is where everything sits as the White House card continues to reshape the sports landscape in real time. Gaethje has a trophy case with no remaining gaps and a legitimate argument for walking away at the absolute peak of his career. Topuria is recovering from serious facial trauma while already plotting his redemption with the same conviction that defined his rise to undefeated champion in the first place. And an entire division of analysts, former champions, and training partners are still working through exactly what happened on that lawn, because 4 months ago, almost nobody believed any version of this outcome was possible.